Strava or Instagram accounts, then you probably already know that the cyclocross race I've done yesterday was super muddy and quite technical. So today naturally it was time to clean everything up and to prepare the bike for the next race. Obviously after a race like this you really don't want to leave it just like that, because, well, all the bearings, the chain and the complete drivetrain will just corrode and degrade a lot. So I decided to do a complete rebuild. One of the reasons why this was necessary was the actual type of soil that we had on there. It wasn't just regular thick mud, but some quite coarse sand particles in it, and then we also had a quite long full-on sand section, and yeah, that's basically what really wears your bike down, because that gloopy mud combined with the sand is just a very good grinding paste, so we really don't want to ride in that too often. So what have I done? You can probably guess from the time-lapse video on the beginning of this, but I will just go through from front to back. So one problem I had, and it appeared in the race as well, but wasn't too bad. The mud actually got into the shifting mechanism on the lever, and it couldn't release properly if you didn't tap it from the other side. So that was a bit annoying, but I cleaned it up. I just sprayed some light oil in there and it washed the particles out, and now it's quite smooth. The second thing I have done is I've regressed the bottom part of the headset. The top doesn't get too much mud or spray, water, whatever, even when you're washing it. But on the bottom I have used a generous amount of aquaproof paste from Kogel, or Morgan Blue, that is. Then another thing I would consider changing the next time are the brake pads. Of course it was a very slow course because of all the mud, but the grit that forms on your rotor keeps wearing down your brake pads as well. So even though it was just a 1 hour race, I got both my front and rear brake pads worn to basically half of their original size. So next time it will be quite useful to check up on those. Then of course the drivetrain, starting with the bottom bracket. The drive side bearing was quite dirty, because as you are pedaling you are basically pushing the mud over there. So I had to completely tear it down, blow it out with the compressor and the degreaser, and re-grease it. I also checked the left side, but it wasn't too problematic. Then I have also noticed that one of my pedals is running too freely, and that you can hear that. That usually happens when the bearing is dry. I think it was due to the pressure washing, but unfortunately if you want to properly clean a bike that's muddy, you are not going to have too much luck with a bucket of water, so you have to get a bit violent with the pressure washer. Never mind. I thought I was going to need the manual to service these pedals, but actually it was quite easy. So you just take off the end cap, then there's another nut under there. We've got a rubber seal here, then a needle bearing somewhere here, and then a tiny cartridge bearing at the end of the axle. So the culprit was the tiny cartridge bearing actually. It had very little grease in it, so I cleaned it, re-greased it, and I also checked the other pedal, even though it was fine, but I have added aquaproof paste on both pedals at the end of the pedaling axle underneath this little cup, so it's harder to wash the actual grease from the tiny bearing in there. So basically, when doing cyclocross maintenance, aquaproof paste is your friend. I have applied it basically everywhere, on the bottom bracket, on the spindle, underneath the mud or dirt shields, and underneath the seals as well, apart from, of course, the actual bearing greases themselves, because that grease is too thick for that. The chain, I didn't clean that just yet, but I have put a new freshly not greased wax chain on the bike. I was actually quite worried about the wax chain in the mud, but in the end I think it held up very well, and my bike was definitely a lot quieter than some other guys' bikes, so that's just a good testament to how good the chain waxing is. And it wasn't too dirty either. Then I have also cleaned the cassette, the chainring. Little close up here. This chainring was basically brand new. I had just about 200 kilometers on it, but the sand particles from the mud wore down quite a lot of it, even though it was quite a short period of time. So that just shows how aggressive this stuff is. I was also really glad that I had this protective film on my cranks. It doesn't look very nice now, but I'm pretty sure it protected the cranks from some nasty scuffs. I was also wearing toe spikes on my shoes, so you can do some pretty bad things to carbon with those. So really good to have some kind of protection. Cork power meter held up very well, despite the nasty conditions. And the final thing I have checked and cleaned and regreased were the pulley wheels. Now you might ask, why did I have a ceramic bottom bracket and ceramic pulley wheels on a cross bike? Is it really necessary? Of course it's not, but in my experience, if you have these high quality stuff with ceramic bearings in them, they are usually designed to be serviced, and they're easy to service. They have larger bearings. If you increase the bearing diameter from, let's say, 5 to 7 millimeters, it might not sound like much, but it improves the durability of the bearing by tens of percent. So yeah, it's a good thing to have, because they're going to be more reliable long term, and possibly, when talking cyclocross, maybe even cheaper as well than replacing the bearings with some cheap ones after every race. One thing I haven't checked were the wheel bearings. Well, I have checked them, but it wasn't necessary to service them, and I think the reason for that is that they're quite hidden away in the hubs, and they sit pretty far back behind the actual thru-axle spacers, so luckily they are still good to go. For the next race, I'm definitely going to prepare some spare disc brake pads, because if we get 1 or 2 more races like this one, these are going to be totally cooked. And perhaps a new chainring as well, because this sandy paste really took a toll on that. Overall, this rebuild, should I say, took me about 2 hours, plus 1 hour for the washing itself. As I said, I did it with a high power pressure washer. It didn't damage the bike, because it has a quite large or a largely spread beam, but of course it's not as gentle as washing it with a bucket of water and a hose. But in these extreme cases that just doesn't work, so it's better to even strip out the bearing grease and all the greases from the parts where it should be, but at least you have a nice and clean bike which you can service afterwards. Much better than if you left the dirty slime in there and just leave it rot. Even if you try to wash it with a hose, it will just probably remain there. Okay, so these were my tips for cyclocross bike rebuilding and maintenance. I hope you don't get to do this too often, because it's quite time consuming, but it's definitely well worth doing, because otherwise your nice bike will be sent in the trash real soon. Now if you want to know more about the actual bike itself and the parts that it's built of, or perhaps my road bike or time trial bike, then don't forget to tune into my channel and subscribe. It's all for today. Thanks for watching and see you next time.